The battlefield above Genesis was a chaos of flashing lights and shattered metal. The human fleet, small but relentless, moved with precision, firing rapid bursts of energy at the Zurian ships in a way that would have seemed reckless to anyone unfamiliar with humanity's approach. But Captain Althea Stark was no stranger to chaos. She thrived in it. On the bridge of the Exodus, Althea stood tall, hands gripping the edge of the command console. Her crew worked in a blur of synchronized motion, the hum of the ship's systems vibrating through the floor. She didn't need to look at the displays to know what was happening. She felt it, instinctively. "Captain, the Zurian command ship is holding its position," Lieutenant Mason reported from his station, his eyes scanning the data feeds with intensity. "They're waiting for us to make the first move." Althea's lips curled into a tight smile. Perfect. She glanced at the battle map in front of her, pinpointing the enemy's vulnerability. The Zurians, with their superior firepower and experience, had underestimated humanity's ability to fight unconventionally. They'd assumed humanity would fight like any other species, straightforward, predictable. But the humans had learned quickly how to exploit their enemies' weaknesses. The Zurians, in their arrogance, had left an opening. "Do they think we're that predictable?" Althea muttered to herself. "Ready to launch the strike, Captain," Mason said, voice steady. "Do it," Althea commanded, her tone cold and firm. "Give them everything we've got." The Exodus lurched as its main weapons powered up, sending high-energy blasts toward the enemy formation. At the same time, smaller human vessels, designed for speed and maneuverability, darted through the enemy lines, using the chaotic fire from the Zurian ships as cover. The Zurians weren't prepared for this. They were not used to facing a species that could think on its feet, that could adapt in the heat of battle. The Zurian fleet scattered, their coordination breaking down as human ships attacked from unexpected angles. "Enemy ships are retreating, Captain," reported Commander Elara, her eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding. "They're losing formation." Althea nodded, her eyes never leaving the view outside. A quick, decisive strike was always the best way to make a point. But this was something else. Humanity wasn't just sending a message. They were making a statement. "Hold steady," she said, her voice firm as the battle raged. "We need them to think this was a fluke. Keep the pressure on them, but don't push too hard. Let them underestimate us." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You want them to believe we're weak?" "Not weak. Predictable," Althea corrected him. "It's how they think we'll fight. And that's their mistake." Outside, the Exodus fired again, hitting one of the Zurian dreadnoughts with devastating accuracy. The alien ship erupted in a flash of light, its hull cracking open like a tin can. The humans were fast, lethal, and everywhere at once. A sudden siren blared on the bridge. Althea's pulse quickened, her mind already working through the possible scenarios. A new wave of Zurian reinforcements had entered the system, more ships, more firepower, but still not enough to overwhelm the humans' tactical advantage. "Elara," Althea snapped. "Have the vanguard units engage at once. We need to draw them in." "Aye, Captain." "The vanguards are moving now." Althea watched the tactical map shift as the smaller human ships maneuvered into position. The vanguards, elite attack vessels designed for quick strikes, moved into the heart of the Zurian formation. The Zurians, predictably, followed them in, eager to trap them in a pincer. But they were walking into a trap of their own. "No," Althea ordered. At her command, a series of hidden missiles erupted from the Exodus and the nearby fleet ships. They streaked across the blackness of space, arcing toward the unsuspecting Zurian ships. In the chaos, the Zurians didn't realize the trap until it was too late. Explosions erupted across their formation as the missiles tore through shields and hulls. The vanguards swooped back in, finishing off the scattered ships with deadly efficiency. The Zurian fleet was in disarray, their advance halted, their pride shattered in a matter of minutes. "Captain, we've secured the field," Mason said, sounding almost too calm. "They're retreating." Althea didn't allow herself a moment of satisfaction. The Zurians had just been caught off guard, but the battle wasn't over. It was only the beginning. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the remaining Zurian ships start to disengage. They were running, but not in fear. They were retreating to regroup, to come back stronger. And when they returned, they wouldn't be so easy to fool. "Prepare for counterattack," Althea ordered, her voice sharp. "They'll be back in force. This time, we make sure they never have the chance to recover." As her crew moved swiftly to comply, a transmission cut through the static of the battlefield, and a cold, calculating voice rang out over the comms. "This is Supreme Commander Thackeray of the Zurian fleet. You are mistaken if you believe you've won. This is only the beginning, human. We will crush you." Althea's lip twitched. The Zurians had just made the mistake of underestimating her people again. Their arrogance would be their undoing. "Tell him we'll be waiting," she said to Mason, her voice calm, even as the storm raged outside. "And get me everything we need to fight back. This battle has only just begun." Thackeray might have thought humanity was a mere nuisance. But Althea Stark knew better. And soon, the Zurians would learn what it truly meant to face a Deathworlder. The hum of the Exodus engines reverberated through the command deck as Captain Althea Stark stared out at the stars. The battle had been a success, but the victory was hollow. A fleeting triumph in the face of what was to come. The Zurians had retreated, but they were not defeated. They had simply regrouped, and when they returned, they would come with a fury. Althea's mind worked, calculating, planning. She was a survivor, but even she knew that survival alone wasn't enough. Humanity needed more than that now. They needed to prove they could dominate this galaxy, that they were not the prey, but the hunters. "Captain!" Lieutenant Mason's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone measured but urgent. "We've intercepted a transmission from Thackeray." Althea didn't need to ask for the details. "Put it through." The cold, arrogant voice of Supreme Commander Thackeray filled the room. "You may have won this skirmish, human. But we will return in full force. Prepare yourselves. We will annihilate your pathetic fleet." The transmission ended abruptly, but the message was clear. The Zurians were not afraid. In fact, Thackeray's words reeked of disdain. He was used to facing enemies who broke at the first sign of aggression. But humanity was different. They had endured too much, fought too hard, to bend to anyone's will. Althea stood tall, her resolve hardening. "He's underestimated us, Mason." Again. Mason gave her a look. "Are we ready for what's coming?" "We will be," Althea replied, her voice tight with determination. "Get the fleet to Rally Point Alpha. I want everyone in position before they make their move." 3 days later, the Exodus and its supporting ships were anchored at the edge of a remote asteroid field, a perfect place to prepare for the upcoming assault. Althea stood at the heart of the command deck, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes scanning the status reports flashing on the screens. The fleet had been bolstered. Human ingenuity was their greatest asset, and they had used every hour to their advantage. Smaller, faster vessels were now outfitted with the latest stealth technology, designed to slip through enemy defenses unnoticed. New weapons had been fitted to the Exodus, including EMP missiles that could disable the advanced systems of the Zurian ships, turning their superior technology against them. Althea's crew was a well-oiled machine now. Commander Ilara, always the calm and collected strategist, was briefing the officers on their new tactics. "Remember, we're fighting a smarter enemy now," Ilara said, her voice steady. "They'll try to predict our movements, and they'll use every trick in the book. We've got to be unpredictable. Hit them where it hurts, then vanish before they can retaliate." Althea stepped forward, her voice cutting through the hum of the room. "We've shown them what we can do in direct combat. Now, we show them what they've never seen before. Surprise them at every turn. We fight as one, each ship, each soldier, working together. If we fail to do that, we fail everything." The crew nodded, understanding the weight of their task. There was no room for error now. The next battle would decide if humanity would be relegated to the fringes of galactic power or if they would carve out their place as the new predators of the stars. Elsewhere on the ship, Mason was reviewing the intelligence gathered from the previous skirmish. The Zurians had deployed a new kind of fighter ship, sleek, fast, and armed to the teeth. If they could get past the first wave of Zurian warships, these new fighters would be the real threat. He turned to Althea, who had entered the tactical operations room, her presence commanding attention without a word. "I've been going through the data," Mason began, pulling up a holographic projection of the Zurian fleet. "These new fighters are fast, but they're not invincible. If we can draw them into the asteroid field, our ship's speed and maneuverability will be our advantage." Althea studied the projection, tapping a finger on the table as she thought. "We'll need to draw them in. But we can't rely on our fighters alone. We need to hit them with everything we've got. The vanguard ships are our best bet for striking first, but we'll need to act quickly. Once they regroup, it'll be harder to pick them off." Mason nodded. "We've got the new EMP missiles ready. They'll disable the larger ship's systems long enough for us to take them down." Althea's lips tightened into a smile, the first flicker of excitement breaking through her focus. "Perfect. We'll blind them, then rip them apart." Hours later, the fleet was ready. The Exodus, surrounded by smaller ships, was poised on the edge of the asteroid field, waiting for the Zurians to make their move. Althea stood on the bridge, every fiber of her being tuned to the moment. She could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was to come. "Scanners are picking up Zurian ships on approach," Mason reported, his fingers dancing over his console. Althea's heart quickened. This was it. The moment they had been preparing for. "Deploy vanguard ships," she ordered. "And prepare EMPs. I want their main fleet in disarray." The vanguards shot off into the dark expanse of space, their engines roaring as they disappeared into the asteroid field. The Zurians were closing in, just as expected. And when they reached the perfect distance, Althea would make her move. As the Zurian ships entered the asteroid field, their sensors were immediately thrown into chaos. The Exodus unleashed a salvo of EMP missiles, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. Zurian fighters faltered, their systems flickering as they struggled to regain control. "Target their engines," Althea commanded. The Exodus fired, a precise barrage that crippled the lead Zurian dreadnought. Explosions tore through the hull as the ship's main reactors went critical, sending debris scattering in every direction. The Zurian fleet staggered, unable to regroup in the face of such a sudden assault. The vanguard struck next, diving in and out of the field with devastating precision. Human pilots weaved through the asteroid belt, picking off fighter after fighter, using the terrain to their advantage. Mason's voice crackled through the comms. "They're falling apart, Captain. The fighters can't keep up." Althea's eyes narrowed. "Don't let up. Keep the pressure on them. We finish this now." The Zurians were retreating again, but this time, they were broken, their once pristine fleet in ruins. Althea watched as their ships scattered, their once proud formation reduced to nothing more than a ragtag group struggling to escape. But Althea knew better than to be complacent. This was a temporary victory. The Zurians would regroup. Thackeray would be back. And when he returned, they would be ready. Althea stood tall, the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, her voice low but resolute. "We've made our point. Now we make sure they never forget it." The Exodus drifted silently in the outer rim of the star system, its hull scarred from the recent battle but still intact. The battle had ended with a resounding victory, at least for now. The Zurians had been broken, their pride shattered, their ships crippled. But Althea Stark knew better than to celebrate. Victory against the Zurians wasn't a conclusion, it was merely a pause. The real fight was still ahead. "Captain, we've received another transmission." Mason's voice broke through her thoughts. Althea's gaze flicked to the comm screen. It was encrypted, but there was no doubt who it was. Thackeray. She'd been expecting this. "Put it through," she ordered. The screen flickered, then the familiar image of Supreme Commander Thackeray appeared. His angular face, framed by the cold, unfeeling gaze of his species, loomed in front of her. His voice was a low growl, dripping with contempt. "You have earned a momentary respite, human. But you are foolish if you think this will end with your pathetic little fleet. You are playing at a war you cannot win. Althea's lips twitched upward, though there was no humor in her expression. Is that so? Thackeray's eyes narrowed. Your ships are nothing. Your tactics, laughable. You cannot defeat us. The Zurian Empire has endured for millennia. You are nothing but insects that will be crushed underfoot. Althea's voice was steady, unwavering. We'll see about that. I've got a fleet of insects that's more than capable of putting down your empire. Thackeray's lip curled in a sneer. We'll see, Captain Stark. When we return, we will show you the true meaning of power. The transmission cut out. Althea stood still for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He was right about one thing: they had made it this far by exploiting their enemies' weaknesses, but now they were facing a power unlike any they'd encountered before. Captain? Elara's voice was calm, but there was an edge of concern. We've analyzed his transmission. He's right, we can't keep playing this game forever. If we're going to win, we need to end this quickly. Althea turned to face her. I know. And we will. But we're not done yet. Thackeray may think his empire is invincible, but we're going to show him what happens when you underestimate humanity. Hours later, the fleet was gathered at the edge of a nearby gas giant, ready for the next phase of their strategy. The asteroid field had served its purpose, but it was time for something more decisive. We've got two objectives, Althea said, her voice calm but sharp. She stood at the center of the briefing room, facing her officers. We're going to draw Thackeray's main fleet into a trap, then hit them with everything we've got. The Exodus will be the bait. Elara, you and the vanguards will be our hammer. Mason, you'll coordinate the diversion. Mason raised an eyebrow. You're not planning to just destroy them, are you? We need them to get the message. Althea's eyes met his, and for a moment, her gaze softened. No. We don't just need to destroy them. We need them to know that they are weak. We need Thackeray to understand that we can take everything he throws at us, and still win. Elara nodded. Understood, Captain? We'll be ready. The next day, the Exodus moved into position, drawing the bulk of the Zurian fleet into pursuit. The plan was risky: bait the Zurians into attacking, then lure them into the trap that had been set up on the far side of the gas giant. The asteroid field was close enough to be useful but distant enough to keep the Zurians from seeing it as an obvious threat. The moment they were within range, the trap would snap shut. Althea stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the horizon as the first wave of Zurian ships entered the area. The Exodus was alone in the field, seemingly vulnerable, just as she had intended. A bold move, but one that would make their enemy believe they had the upper hand. Captain, we've got multiple Zurian vessels locking on, Mason reported from his station. They're taking the bait. Althea nodded, her pulse steady. It was time. Deploy the vanguards, she ordered. The small, fast ships zipped through the asteroid field, using its cover to maneuver around the incoming Zurian fleet. As the Zurians closed in on the Exodus, the vanguards broke through the field, launching a devastating series of attacks on the flanks of the Zurian formation. The sheer unpredictability of the strike caused immediate disarray. No, Althea said, her voice cold with resolve. Hit them with everything. From all sides, human ships emerged from hiding, their weapons aimed and ready. The Zurians were caught off guard, unable to regroup in time. EMP blasts hit their main fleet, knocking out shields and rendering their heavy ships vulnerable. The Exodus itself unleashed its full firepower, targeting the flagship with surgical precision. The Zurian flagship, the one Thackeray was on, took a direct hit. Explosions rippled across its hull, and a shockwave sent ripples through space. For a moment, there was silence. Direct hit on the flagship, Mason said, voice laced with disbelief. They're not going to recover from that. But Althea didn't celebrate. She didn't let herself. Not yet. Don't let up, she commanded, her voice tight. This is only the first step. The battle raged for hours. Every human ship was in sync, moving like a well-practiced machine, anticipating and countering every Zurian move. They were quick, unpredictable, and brutal. Thackeray had made the mistake of assuming they could not fight with purpose or coordination. He had assumed wrong. The Exodus weaved through fire, returning strike after strike, but always with the precision that came from years of human ingenuity. Even as the Zurians retaliated with everything they had, the humans were relentless, never slowing down, always pushing forward. And then, as Althea watched the enemy fleet break apart, she felt it, the tipping point. The Zurians were faltering. The human fleet had struck fast, struck hard, and struck without mercy. Mason's voice came over the comms. "Captain, we've got Thackeray's ship in our sights. The flagship is all but destroyed." Althea's fingers tightened around the arm of her command chair. "Finish it." The final blow was swift. The flagship, once a symbol of the Zurian Empire's might, was no more. It exploded in a burst of fire and debris, and with it, the last hope of a Zurian victory evaporated. The remaining Zurian ships, their morale shattered, began to retreat in disarray. Althea stood tall, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The war was far from over, but this battle, this one would be remembered. The humans had proven their strength. They had proven their will. And for the Zurians, that was a lesson they would never forget. "Message to the fleet," Althea said, her voice carrying over the comms. "We've won. But this is only the beginning." The stars stretched out before Captain Althea Stark, their light flickering as the Exodus drifted into a quiet orbit. The battle was over. The Zurians had retreated, broken and scattered, but Althea knew better than to think that it was truly finished. The destruction of Thackeray's flagship was a severe blow, but not a fatal one. The Zurians were resilient, they would recover. And they would be back. They had to be. It was the only thing that made sense. She was alone in the command deck, her eyes fixed on the quiet expanse of space. For a moment she allowed herself a rare breath of relief. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was a message. And that, she hoped, would be enough. "Captain?" Mason's voice broke through the quiet, pulling Althea back to the present. His tone was urgent. "We've got something incoming." She turned to face him, every muscle in her body tensing instinctively. "What is it?" "Multiple warships, large ones. They're coming in fast. And they're Zurian." Althea's heart skipped a beat. She had known it would happen. The question was when. The Zurians hadn't forgotten. They would never forget what had happened today. "How many?" she asked, moving quickly toward the console. Mason's fingers flew over his terminal. "At least 3 dreadnoughts. They're in formation, and they're closing in on our position." She narrowed her eyes. "They're coming straight for us?" "They are," Mason confirmed. "And based on their current trajectory, they'll be here in less than an hour." The clock was ticking. Althea took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle back onto her shoulders. There was no time for hesitation. The Exodus needed to be ready. She turned to face her crew, their faces tense but focused. "Prepare the fleet," she said, her voice steady. "This is what we've been preparing for." Within the hour, the Exodus was surrounded by her fleet, positioned for the inevitable confrontation. Althea stood at the heart of the command deck, reviewing the final adjustments to the ship's systems. The Zurians would come in strong, trying to capitalize on the sense of revenge they must have felt after the destruction of their flagship. But the humans had their own plan. "We're not just going to meet them head-on," Althea said, turning toward Ilara. "We're going to use their rage against them. We'll lure them in. Make them think they have the upper hand, then strike when they're too far into retreat." Ilara nodded, her gaze focused. "Understood. We'll hold position and wait for them to close the gap. But we need to be sure the vanguards are in position to flank them as soon as they break formation." Mason, standing at the comms station, looked up. "We've also got a problem. Their fleet is carrying advanced jamming technology. We won't have the luxury of our usual long-range communications." Althea's eyes darkened. "We'll have to adapt. No comms means no backup. We're on our own." "Not entirely," Mason countered. "We've got our stealth drones. They can go ahead and disrupt their jamming network before we engage. It was a risky move. Sending the drones out first meant exposing them to enemy fire, but Althea knew it was their best shot. Make it happen, she said. The Exodus and the rest of the fleet moved into position, with the vanguards slipping into place, hidden behind the asteroids at the edge of the system. The Zurians, blind to their movements, advanced. The sheer size of the 3 Zurian dreadnoughts was enough to make Althea's stomach tighten. Their designs were formidable, built for one purpose: to dominate the battlefield. But she knew that even the strongest forces could be undone if their weaknesses were exposed. Drones deployed, Mason said, breaking the tense silence. They're moving in. Althea's eyes stayed fixed on the fleet as the drones, small and nearly invisible, darted toward the Zurian ships. The Zurians' advanced jamming systems began to flicker and fail as the drones unleashed a barrage of electronic interference. Althea watched as their communication channels began to fray, the long-range sensors glitching and failing in quick succession. They're blind, Mason said with a satisfied grin. We've got them. The first wave of Zurian ships moved forward, eager to engage, unaware that their prey was much more prepared than they had assumed. No, Althea ordered, her voice firm. The fleet sprang into action. The Exodus fired first, sending a barrage of energy blasts straight at the nearest dreadnought. The Zurian ship staggered under the force, but it didn't break. Not yet. The battle was just beginning. Elara, we need to keep them off balance, Althea said, voice tense but commanding. Hit them hard with the vanguards. We need to pull their attention to the flanks. Elara's voice was steady as she replied. On it, Captain. The vanguards surged forward, their engines roaring as they launched waves of precise shots, striking the Zurian ships with pinpoint accuracy. Each hit created a burst of energy, sending ripples through the enemy lines. The Zurians retaliated fiercely, but they were disoriented, their formation broken. The vanguards danced through the chaos, fast and agile, evading the bulk of the Zurian fire while picking off targets with brutal efficiency. We've got an opening, Mason said. The Exodus can land another strike. Althea wasted no time. Take it. Full power. The Exodus unleashed everything it had. A concentrated beam of energy lanced out from the main cannon, striking the heart of one of the dreadnoughts. The massive ship shuddered as its internal reactors ruptured, sending shockwaves through its hull. It started to break apart, the explosion tearing through its structure like a hammer striking glass. But even as the first dreadnought fell, the others pressed on. The Zurians were relentless, their fury only fueling their determination. Althea's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was clear. They could do this. They had to. We need to finish this, Althea said. Mason, can you cut their communications? If they can't coordinate, they'll crumble. Already on it, Mason responded, his fingers flying over the console. They won't know what hit them. The final moments of the battle were a blur of fire and fury. The Exodus fired again and again, targeting weak points, cutting through the remaining ships like a hot knife through butter. The Zurians tried to regroup, but it was too late. Their ships were burning, their systems failing, their resolve crumbling. The last Zurian dreadnought exploded in a flash of brilliant white, the remnants of their fleet scattered to the winds. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Althea exhaled. The battle was won. The Zurians were broken. For now. Mason's voice echoed in the command deck. We've done it. They're finished. But Althea's gaze remained fixed on the empty expanse before them. This isn't over, she whispered to herself. It's just begun.